I got such a big head. Hey y'all, hey, it is me, just Allie, and I promised y'all I was going to do a video on critical race theory, and I just didn't have a chance to get to it this weekend, so that is why I'm bringing it to you now. I do have a virtual black background, as you can see, it's so trippy, but that was just easier than cleaning up the mess behind me, so I'm trying to not move too much because I don't want myself to come in and out of focus like that. But anyway, let's talk about critical race theory. What is critical race theory? The core idea of critical race theory is racism is a social construct and not an individual prejudice. Racism is part of everyday life, and people, white and non white, some who do not intend to be racist, still make decisions fueled by racism. So, simply put, it's a framework of understanding how American racism has shaped public policy. On April 20th, 2021, Senator Tim Scott, Republican from the great state of South Carolina, famously claimed America's not racist. But the refusal to acknowledge how racism is integrated into the systems keeps us from fixing the issue. So let's start with a definition. Systemic, fundamental to a predominant social, economic, or political practice. Now, let me point out a few ways racism is systemic in America. Education, curricula that vastly ignores the lived experiences of Americans of color are the norm. Decisions that were made that shape policy, fundamental to a predominant social, economic, and political practice. Republicans actively fighting to ensure it stays this way. Decisions being made that shape policy fundamental to a predominant social, economic, or political practice. In medicine, J. Marion Sims, credited for inventing the vaginal speculum. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up. But he's considered to be the father of gynecology. Well, Sims experimented on Black women who were enslaved, performing surgical techniques without the use of anesthesia, because there was a mythology that Black skin is stronger and Black people don't feel pain in the same way. Now, this shit is deeply layered. Even today, doctors tend not to prescribe pain medicines to minorities. In the study of emergency rooms, Black patients were 40% less likely, and Hispanic patients were 25% less likely to get drugs for acute pain. And according to the CDC, Black, Native American, and Alaska Native women are dying from pregnancy-related causes at 2 to 3 times higher the rate than white women. In housing, zoning laws in the United States originated in the 20th century, and for many cities, these zone areas were specifically segregated by race. When Black war veterans returned home from World War II, the Federal Housing Administration didn't allow them to obtain mortgages, even though they rightfully had the right to obtain VA loans. When the Homeowners Loan Corporation, now defunct, and the still operational Federal Housing Administration, FHH, were created to FHA, Federal Housing Administration, were created during the Great Depression. They had a two-tiered approach to housing, which promoted residential segregation by shunning investments in city areas where people of color lived, and by placing restrictive covenants to keep middle-class neighborhoods white. The Federal Housing Administration. Let me say that again. The Federal Housing Administration. These are decisions that were made that shape policy fundamental to predominant social, economic, and political practice. Now, let me bring this to 2020. A mixed race couple in Florida whose home in Jacksonville had initially been appraised at $330,000 back in June of 2020, removed all evidence that Black people lived in the home, took down artwork and family pictures, and had the home reappraised, and it came in at 40% higher. The same thing happened to a woman in Indiana. This economically impacts families of color. These are decisions that are made that shape policy fundamental to a predominant social, economic, and political practice. Employment. Schools and work policies that discriminate against locks, cornrows, or natural hairstyles of Black people are still prevalent. So much so that the first legislation that passed that prohibited discrimination passed in California on June 27th, 2019. Today is June 21st, 2021. Hasn't even been 2 years. These are decisions that are made that shape policy fundamental to social, economic, or political practice. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, Black Americans with white sounding names receive 50% more callbacks for job applications. Decisions that are made that shape policy fundamental to predominant social, economic, and political practice. In prison sentencing, according to the ACLU, Black Americans are 3.6 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana usage, despite virtually equal usage rates. It's systemic. These are decisions that are made that shape policy fundamental to a predominant social, economic, and political practice. And I'm not even going to get into policing because that video could be an hour or more by itself. But we all saw the George Floyd video last year. Although many people are hoping to ignore inequality and it will go away, that's not how this works. It's not how any of this works. Critical race theory isn't a class or a curriculum. It's a lens through which you examine the history of racism in America. So why is it such a big deal now, 40 years later? Well, I can say that Republicans don't have a policy, so they create a public enemy and run against it. Simply speaking, that's the truth. That's what Donald Trump did. It was immigrants and build a wall. For today's party, it's critical race theory. But let's dig a little bit deeper. It started with the 1619 Project, which pulled the impact of enslavement out of the shadows and into the forefront. And people are shook. Now, I'll say this one time in defense of people, it's a history they were never taught. History for Black people goes something like this. You were slaves, Harriet Tubman helped free some slaves, Lincoln freed the rest, Martin Luther King marched, Rosa Parks sat on the bus, Oprah is a millionaire, you had Barack Obama. Because of the 1619 Project, this piss poor slice of Black American history, only taught between February 1st and February 28th, became glaringly obvious. White people became uncomfortable. Not the students, the parents. The students came home and asked about the Trail of Tears, and the parents stammered for a loss for words. Truthfully, they weren't taught. The children came home and said, Mom, did you know that the American economy was built on slavery? And their parents didn't know what to say. So they did what Karens do and marched up to the school and demanded that the curricula continue to omit the lived experiences of Americans of color. The language in the law actually says a course can't include the idea that any individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or another form of psychological distress on account of his or her race or sex. They fear exposing children to these concepts, also known as the truth about America's flawed founding, is somehow damaging or demoralizing. But I have a question. Is it demoralizing to think your entire race is insignificant, did not contribute to America in any way, shape, or form? With these new bills, history teachers can't teach about the Trail of Tears or slavery or the many, many race massacres that occurred, such as Colfax, Louisiana in 1873, Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898, Washington, D.C. in 1919, Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, or Rosewood, Florida in 1923, just to name a few. These true historical events are uncomfortable, but from a little discomfort, a lot of growth can occur. Critical race theory is not a problem. The problem is discomfort. Learning the horrific truths about slavery is uncomfortable. That's why history books tell a story of happy slaves who were fed and clothed. The 1619 Project was a flashlight on undeniable truths, and now a party all about small government is trying to legislate comfort. America is not what it used to be, but it will never be great until we can deal with a little discomfort. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Leave them in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will catch you on the next video.